family. Welcome to the African Exodus show. I'm your host, Tini Cherie, here to you with a new video. Before we get started with today's segment, I want to remind you, if you would like to stay connected outside of YouTube, the best way to do so is to add yourself to my Telegram channel. There, I post anytime that I have a new upload. In addition, we have a community chat there if you want to be a part of that conversation. In addition, if you wish to support this platform, you could do so through CashApp, and also you could do so through my Patreon. There, I share a weekly exclusive just for you. With that, let's get started with African and world news. Everyone, please forgive me also if the noise is bad. I have some background noise going on, but we're going to try to push forward with this video. So there was a new report that came out that 3 Tanzanian soldiers were killed in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's been a lot of violence happening in the Congo for a long time, and a lot of people are not aware of the particularities of why this is happening. The thing that we should understand is that this is literally a shadow of the war that caused the Rwanda genocide, and also has been a rollover of a number of events that have happened since then. It's been 30 years since the Rwandan genocide. And the one consistent actor throughout all of the travels of this region, whether it be Congo or Rwanda, wherever, whether it be Uganda, the one consistent actor that's been very present, instigating behind the scenes, has been the United States government. So I want us to understand what's happening in Congo from that vantage point, understanding that the U.S. has always been the one manipulating the politics of these countries in this region. So we're going to read about the 3 Tanzanian soldiers who were killed in the DRC. It says they were part of a Southern African peacekeeping force deployed in December last year to help government troops battling M23 rebels in the ongoing conflict in the restive eastern DRC. The force includes soldiers from regional military heavyweight, South Africa, Tanzania, and Malawi. It is being reported that the mortar attack took place last Thursday, and that a ceremony was held to honor the dead at the SADC headquarters in the provincial capital of Goma on Monday. The DRC and the UN and Western countries accuse the neighboring country of Rwanda of supporting the rebels in a bid to control the region's vast mineral resources, an allegation that Kigali denies. The eastern part of the DRC has been plagued by violence from local and foreign armed groups for nearly 30 years. After several years of dormancy, the mostly Totsi M23 group took up arms again in late 2021 and has seized large swaths of North Kivu province. The one thing that you should understand about this particular story is that this is a runoff, again, of the exact war between the Hutus and the Tutsis. Now, just an add-in of information I think a lot of people might not be aware of, that the Tutsis, very interesting enough, are actually Hebrew. And many people don't know this, that they have actually traced their oral tradition to the region where I have said on this channel and others have been saying is the true region of Israel or Yasharel. That is East Africa, not in Palestine. So I'm just going to read really quickly from a segment of my book, Conspiracy to Erase a Nation. The Tutsi, also called the Watusi, or a Bantu-speaking tribe located in Rwanda and Burundi. The tribe has a history of immense suffering and oppression, having been victims of grave persecution, including 2 genocides. One genocide in Burundi in 1993, where 25,000 to 50,000 Tutsi were killed, and another in Rwanda in 1994, where as many as 800,000 Tutsi were killed. According to their oral history, the Tutsi were disaffected royal family members from the remnants of Yasharel, who migrated to the Great Lakes region from Ethiopia in ancient times to protect their holy sites on Mount Kilimanjaro and secret gold mines from the kingdom. It goes down to quote an organization called Havela. It says, the political organization of the Batutsi kingdoms from the Kush kingdom until the Zagwe kingdoms in 1270 to 1960 are strictly related to the Solomonic system. The Hebraic Kushtrut under the Levitic law is the staple of Batutsi feeding. Batutsi system of law is the exact copy of the Deuteronomical Code, and none can attest that such a system is of recent import. So the Tutsis, very interestingly enough, although it's not widely known across the world that the true Yasharel is actually in East Africa and not inside of Palestine, despite that, they say we are Hebrews that came from Ethiopia. They also have the customs and traditions that verify this and the oral history that backs this. So this is very interesting because, of course, the Tutsis were the victims of the Rwandan genocide. 800,000 Tutsis killed inside of an event that lasted, I think, just over 100 days. Think about the profoundness of that. And do not think that the fact that they're Hebrew has nothing to do with this. But it's very important. This is not a conflict where there's good guy, bad guy. Like a lot of conflicts they try to depict a number of conflicts. This is one of mass deception and manipulation, particularly from the Western imperialists, most notably the United States government. So understand that the US absolutely had the biggest role of any country to play in the massacre of Tutsis and also the stirring up of violence and discontent between the Tutsis and the Hutus. And that continues to today when you see this M23 militia that has risen back up and is being armed by the Rwandan government, the Tutsi-led Rwandan government. So like I said, it's not an issue of good person, bad person, because don't get confused. All because the Tutsis in themselves are Hebrew, don't think they cannot also be used as props, just like many of us are inside of Babylon. Many of us could be used in order to inflict harm on our brothers and sisters. And one Tutsi in particular who we're going to talk about, who has been used to do just that, is Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda. He's been lauded by many people, particularly inside of the new pan-Africanist movement, where we don't necessarily care about the effects that people's actions have, but we more care about the ends that happen as a result. So he's been lauded because he's made Rwanda a very stable country compared to what it was. He's also made it a clean country, a country that a lot of people want to migrate to. He also talks boldly to the West, although his actions say that he's a part of the West. That should be emphasized. He talks boldly like he's focused on Africa, but really his actions say that he's a part of the imperialist machine. That's Paul Kagame. Now, Paul Kagame, if you understand his history, he previously served inside of the Rwandan army, and he actually was trained by the United States government, and that needs to be emphasized. He was trained, literally took his bags and went to America and was trained at a military base in Kansas. And after he was trained, he goes back to Rwanda. And after that, a number of things unfold that basically lead to the Rwandan genocide. This is important to know because if you're going to label him a hero without knowing that people were positioning him long before he even had the opportunity to present himself as a hero, then you understand that perhaps your admiration is something that was planted, something that was planned, something that was orchestrated by the imperialists to control your narratives and your understanding of the African continent. So I want to talk about the Rwandan genocide, obviously a very horrific event that happened. And then we're going to relate that to the story that just came out about this M23 gang. So we just hit 30 years since the Rwandan genocide. They just had a commemoration of the horrific event. And interestingly enough, one of the people who attended is Bill Clinton. If you don't know Bill Clinton and Paul Kagame, they're like this, despite the fact that Bill Clinton was president at the time when the Rwandan genocide happened. And literally, if you know about the politics of what was going on in the US, they did not want to do anything to stop this genocide. And I'm going to show you why they probably did not want to do anything, because they had a hand in causing it, but they really did not want to do anything. One interesting thing is there was this large debate that was going on at the time to where every single politician was afraid to use the word genocide. The reason they were afraid to use the word genocide is because as signatures of the Genocide Convention, they would have been mandated to literally jump into the fight to stop it. So they said everything they could. They might have said like ethnic cleansing or ethnic violence, but they would not use the term genocide. What does this remind you of? Well, obviously this is very similar to what we see in Palestine. So Rwandans are commemorating 30 years since the genocide, in which an estimated 800,000 people were killed by government-backed extremists, shattering the East African country that continues to grapple with the horrific legacy of the massacres. Rwanda has a strong economic growth, emphasize that, strong economic growth, but scars remain. And there are questions about whether genuine reconciliation has been achieved under the long rule of President Kagame, whose rebel movement stopped the genocide and seized power. Paul Kagame gets to claim to be a hero because by the common narrative, it was him. While the West abandoned Rwandans, it was him who stepped in to stop the genocide of the Tutsis. The killings were ignited when a plane carrying then President Juvenal, and I always have problems pronouncing this name, Habyarimana, a Hutu who was shot down over Kigali. The Tutsis were blamed for downing the plane and killing the president and became targets in massacres led by Hutu extremists that lasted over 100 days in 1994. Some moderate Hutus did also try to protect members of the Tutsi community, and they too were killed. Rwandan authorities have long blamed the international community for ignoring the warnings of the killings, and some Western leaders have expressed regret. Bill Clinton, after leaving office, cited the Rwandan genocide as a failure of his administration. President Emmanuel Macron, in a pre-recorded video ahead of Sunday's ceremony, said on Thursday that France and its allies could have stopped the genocide, but lacked the will to do so. Macron's declaration came 3 years after he acknowledged the overwhelming responsibility of France, Rwanda's closest European ally in 1994, for failing to stop Rwanda's slide into slaughter. Now, of course, this is cover because it was not France who was the most responsible for what happened in the Rwandan genocide. This is all cover. The United States was there in the region before the genocide happened, and they were there setting up their guy, Paul Kagame, to take over Rwanda. So let's read about that. So we're reading from a report from the Black Agenda report. It says, murderer of millions in Congo and Rwanda. Paul Kagame, U.S.-backed warlord and dictator of Rwanda, last week accused France and Belgium of complicity in the mass killings in his country 20 years ago. It is true, France and Belgium, along with Britain, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany, are collectively responsible for the extermination of hundreds of millions of whole persons all across the globe. However, in the case of the Rwanda genocide of 1994, the main criminals are Paul Kagame himself and his allies in neighboring Uganda and in the United States. After the frenzy of killing was done, U.S. President Bill Clinton and Ugandan strongman Yoweri Museveni then joined Kagame to launch a war against the neighboring Democratic Republic of the Congo that has claimed 6 million lives, the greatest genocide by far since World War II. So this is what you should understand, is that after the Rwanda genocide happened, a lot of Hutus were said to have fled into Congo. Now, this gives the perfect setup for the United States, because what country in Africa is the richest, minerally rich country in the entire world, actually, not just Africa? It's the Congo. The Congo has minerals out of this world. All of the African continent is rich, but the Congo in particular, very rich. That's why I say this region, according to Genesis, would match the region of Fivila. So the United States had the reason, because they wanted to supposedly aid Rwanda in going to war against the Hutu people who were waging war against the Tutsis. So because of this, they joined in with Kagame and with Uganda to raid the Democratic Republic of the Congo and killed so many people. That should be emphasized. We talk about the 800,000 Tutsis that were so horribly executed, so horribly killed, maimed. It's not even talking about the people who were just simply lost limbs, people who lost parents. So this is horrible. We can't lose sight of the fact that this became a war where 6 million people were killed. Absolutely horrific, and the United States is the one responsible. So it says, back in 1994, Paul Kagame commanded thousands of Tutsi soldiers who had recently been part of the Ugandan army where Kagame served as chief of intelligence. Kagame had also studied at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College in Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. His men invaded Rwanda, killing thousands of mostly Hutu civilians in their drive to reestablish minority Tutsi rule over the country. In the midst of peace negotiations, someone shot down the plane that was carrying Rwanda's Hutu president, Juvenal Habyarimana. I butchered his name. Let's try again. Juvenal Habyarimana, and Cyprian Ntaryamira, and also who was also the Hutu president of Burundi, a country that was with virtually the same history of Tutsi domination. The death of the two Hutu presidents set off renewed fighting, which the United States did nothing to prevent, resulting in a bloody return to the minority Tutsis in power and the exile of over 1 million Hutus. Many tens of thousands of Hutus died before the president's plane went down, and many more were slaughtered by Kagame's forces afterwards. But thanks to Western media, the 1994 bloodbath in Rwanda is most universally remembered only as a genocide against the Tutsis. So you see how they were able to use the Tutsis, who we see, as we said, were also Hebrew. They were able to use them for their own means. They had reason now to invade the Congo, which is also a country with many Hebrew tribes, by the way. They had leverage to invade the Congo because of the genocide against the Tutsis, and they completely erased the crimes of the United States government and the crimes of Paul Kagame. 6 million people, again, did, and instead allowed Western media to depict over and over again the Rwandan genocide, but while forgetting the genocide of the Congo people. So let's go to the end of the article. It says, so who shot the president's plane to set off this catastrophic chain of events? Paul Kagame and the United States make the fantastic claim that the Hutus killed their own presidents in fear that they might sign a peace deal. There is no evidence of such a plot, which sounds counterintuitive on its face. The most logical murder suspect is Kagame's own rebel Tutsi army, which was formed for the purpose of overthrowing Hutu majority governments in Rwanda and Burundi. That is to bring down people like the dead presidents. So this has to be emphasized that the president of Rwanda, the former president, Habyarimana, again, hope I'm pronouncing it sort of right, but his death was literally what caused the Rwandan genocide. Now, here's something interesting. There's a lot of reports that Paul Kagame is the actual one who shot down the plane. As of today, no one has definitively said this person or proven in court this person is the one that shot down the plane of the president of Rwanda. But Paul Kagame was subject to an investigation by the French government where they actually reached the conclusion from that investigation it was him, and also his close allies. One who was the U.S. ambassador to the United States actually came out and confirmed that Paul Kagame bragged to him about killing the former president. So it says, is an article from BBC. In 2006, a French judge accused Mr. Kagame and his allies of killing Mr. Habyarimana, an allegation he dismissed as ridiculous, insisting extremist Hutus shot down the plane, and blamed the RPF to provide a pretext for carrying out the premeditated slaughter. So again, doesn't quite make sense. The Hutus killed their own president in order to blame the Tutsis and give themselves a pretext to go to war against the Tutsis. He told the BBC's Hard Talk program in 2007, I'm not responsible for Habyarimana's death, and I don't care. I wasn't responsible for his security, and he wasn't responsible for mine either. He wouldn't have cared if I died, and I don't care that it happened to him. So this is supposedly someone who's innocent saying, I don't care that he died anyways, by the way. Mr. Rudasingwa, who was the RPF Secretary General and Major at the time of the genocide, he released a statement that said on his Facebook that Mr. Kagame was responsible. He said the RPF leader was aware at the time of the implications of downing the plane. He fully understood that an action like that one might trigger consequences which, as we know, in our country and in the Great Lakes region, actually produced that crime of genocide. Mr. Hodisingwa said he regretted that afterwards, as Rwanda's ambassador to the United States, that he had promoted Kagame's version of events. Now, I want to emphasize this again. Kagame did not do this on his own. Kagame was working with the United States government. He was trained by the United States government, trained in order to carry out their agendas. So I want to talk about the M23 crisis that happens right now with that background. So essentially, Kagame, in the here and present, is still inside of Congo, but the way that he has operated in the Congo is by using a militia group known as M23. So this militia group has been known to do vast human rights atrocities inside of the Congo. And as a result of their presence, essentially, other militia groups have risen up to fight them. So you have the Congo government who's supporting these other militia groups who also are doing horrible things. Then you have the Rwandan government that is supporting the M23. And all of this is happening while there are civilians, people who are innocent, have nothing to do with this. And all of this, I promise you, comes down to the fact that the minerals inside of the Congo is what they're really after. And I also forgot to mention, this is an important detail not to glance over, Rwanda's safety, security, their riches are a direct link to the Congo's cobalt resources, meaning Rwanda got rich from the raids they did on the people of Congo. They got rich from taking the minerals of the people of Congo. So anyone who goes to Rwanda to live there and live a happy life, just understand that all of the peace and security you think you're receiving is as a result of the blood of over 6 million people in Congo. This is just talking about the wars in the 90s, not talking about the violence that continues up till today. So the Rwanda-backed M23 armed group has committed summary executions and forced recruitment of civilians in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. And it says that the Congolese army has been responding to the M23 offensive by collaborating with ethnic militias with abusive records. Recent investigations by the UN group of experts on the Congo, as well as the Human Rights Watch research, provide significant photographic evidence that Rwanda is not only giving logistical support to M23, but that the Rwanda troops are reinforcing or fighting alongside the armed troops inside of Congo. The Rwanda government has denied supporting M23. So here's one example of some of the horrific things that are happening. It's one woman giving her testimony. She's 38 years old. She says she was at home with her husband, and there were M23 fighters that kicked in the door. They took my husband and my son by force outside and told me to stay in the house. If you come out, we'll kill you. I closed the door behind them. They shot them a few meters away. I could see them through a hole. Her husband was seriously injured, but her 25-year-old son was killed. Very horrible. Something you should also understand about these M23 rebels is that this group has been alive for a few decades now, or over a decade now. And essentially, they were present whenever Obama was in office. They recently went dormant and came back after being dormant for a few years. Now, the history of this M23 group that lets you know that they are, number one, supported by Rwanda, but also supported by the United States, is the United States has ran cover for them, similar to, not as, egregious, but similar to how you see the U.S. running cover for Israel, although they're carrying out a genocide in Gaza as we speak. They have ran cover for Kagame and their involvement with this group. So this is an article from New African, the hidden hand behind Congo's war. The latest UN group of experts accuses Uganda and Rwanda of supporting the DRC's M23 rebel group. Washington has clearly been embarrassed by the UN group's experts report, which clearly states that there was significant and credible evidence that Rwanda and Uganda are arming and providing troops. The U.S. failed to block the report's publication following its being leaked on October 17th. A day after the leak, Rwanda was admitted as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. Uganda, as for its part, resorted to a tantrum, threatening to pull out of the AU peacekeeping duties inside of Somalia. Museveni's government was angry over the UN report, which accuses Uganda and Rwanda military officers of direct involvement with the rebels wreaking havoc in eastern Congo. The report insists that despite Rwanda and Uganda's strong denials, they have continued to support the M23 in their 6-month fight against the Congolese government inside of North Kivu. Both Rwanda and Uganda have been supporting M23, says the 44-page report, while Rwanda officials coordinated the creation of the rebel movement as well as its major military operations. Uganda's more subtle support for M23 allowed the rebel group's political branch to operate within Kampala and boost its external relations. According to the report, Bosco Ntaganda, a former Congolese general wanted by the ICC for alleged war crimes, controls the rebellion on the ground, and the M23 leader, Sultani Makenga, is in charge of operations and coordination with the allied groups. So some of you might remember Susan Rice, who was the U.S. ambassador to the UN. She was, again, running cover for Rwanda, very similar to how we see the UN ambassador today running cover for Israel. It says Susan Rice, U.S. ambassador to the UN, insisted that Rwanda be given a chance to see the report. Okay, this report that details Rwanda is responsible for M23. She said they should see the report first. and respond before publication, which was criticized by Jason Stearns of the International Crisis Group for delaying the publication of the UN Group of Experts interim report. While it is procedurally correct that the UN investigator should give the accused the opportunity to respond to the report before publication, the UN experts say they were refused a meeting by the Rwandan government, which Kigali denies. The experts finally briefed a Rwandan delegation to New York in June. The Rwandans naturally rejected the report as flawed, but it was nonetheless released. Stearns says that Susan Rice emerged as a skeptic within the State Department that had largely accepted Rwanda's role in backing the M23. Both Assistant Secretary of State Johnny Carlson and the Special Envoy Barry Wolke have told Kigali that it must stop supporting M23. According to an international NGO that follows the Security Council politics closely, Rice isn't convinced that the Rwandan support is ongoing. Maybe there was some in the past, but not now. Others point to Rice's skepticism of the UN Group of Experts reports and their methodology. Her latest controversial step was to block the explicit naming of Rwanda and Uganda in the UN Security Council's resolution seeking to condemn the M23 occupation of Goma. As in previous statements, the Security Council demanded that any and all outside support to the M23 cease immediately. Other Security Council members had wanted to name Rwanda explicitly, but Rice demurred, arguing that this would not be constructive in a process in which Rwanda must be a part of the solution. Rice supporters stated this was simply the official position of the U.S. and she was only following orders from Washington. But France finally tabled a resolution condemning Rwanda and Uganda for backing the M23, yet only a lighter version was issued after Rice protested. Going on, it says, after Obama came to power, his administration's policy on the Congo question did not change from his predecessors. In fact, one of Obama's advisors was embarrassingly caught red-handed while attempting to smuggle minerals from Eastern Congo into his jet when it was impounded. How come we didn't hear? I didn't hear anything about one of Obama's advisors smuggling minerals from the Congo. So that's something that escaped the news, I suppose. Now, also Britain is complicit with Rwanda. In fact, you might see that Kagame was actually recently in Britain. They're doing a deal, remember, so that Rwanda will receive the refugees of the British government. It says, for its part, Britain has been blocking EU sanctions against Rwanda. In fact, it went back on its word when the former Secretary for International Development, Andrew Mitchell, told the MPs that he had decided to resume Britain's $35 million aid package to Rwanda. After 2 or 3 conditions set by the UK, a ceasefire in the Kivu and also an end to practical support from Rwanda militias were met. Feeling isolated and under pressure after all the EU countries suspended their aid to Rwanda, Britain Prime Minister David Cameron finally acknowledged that the international community could not ignore evidence of Rwandan involvement in M23, called on Kagame to show that the government of Rwanda had no links to M23, but still they continue to support Rwanda monetarily. So what this shows right here is that this entire thing is orchestrated again by the imperialists, particularly the United States and Britain. We can see very clearly their hands and tentacles are throughout the African continent. And so all of this killing, if you're wondering why all this killing in the Congo, again, we have a Totsi leader of Rwanda who's being used as the face of reconciliation as far as the genocide, but at the same time, terrorizing other parts of the African continent. But we're going to forget about all of that because of this horrible genocide that happened. So we see how our tragedies, our deaths, or the violence in our community gets to be used against us, similar to how George Floyd's horrible death was used against us, because now you have all of these people who are milking it for their own personal benefit. Same thing happens all throughout the African experience. This is what's happening right here. We have a people who have suffered, Tutsi people who have suffered, but now they're being used by the United States in order to control a region of Africa and to control their mineral resources. So it's important that you know this background. I think it's important, particularly because we're going to, unfortunately, keep hearing these stories of the Congo until we are completely liberated from this demonic system. And the only one who will do that, we know, is Yah. So we definitely want to keep our prayers for the people who are suffering under this imperialist onslaught. But with that, I thank you all for watching. Yah willing, I'll see you in the next video.
We are not Africans.
All right.
We are possessed. by spirits and demons. We have let another people's spirit take possession of our bodies and take possession of our minds. When we speak, it is not with our African voice. It is with the voice of that demonic presence that uses our lips to speak its own language. Yes. Yes, and we have to recognize this. We are possessed. And if we are to transform ourselves and to transform that the nature of our relationship with those who are our masters, we must engage in an exorcism and clear the devils out of our minds. And at this time, then, it'll pay you to read a little bit about demonic possession. And we have to be demonically possessed. Because if we talk about black-on-black violence, self-defeating behavior, self-destructive behavior, then we could not be possessed by a beautiful and wonderful God. We must be possessed by a demon. It's interesting to look at the literature on possession. We have a couple of types of possession. One is called a somnambulistic possession. Somnambulistic. Soma, in this instance, having to do with sleep. You hear it in the word sominex. Ambulistic, to move around. Ambulatory, right? So we're talking about people who are what? Sleepwalking. They're not awake, but they're walking around. The body is moving and it is walking in an organized fashion and walking systematically, but the person is still asleep. And in somnambulistic possession, then, the individual's original self has been repressed and displaced, and the spirit, and he identifies with the spirit that possesses him. And his I and the spirit's I are one and the same. And we have a lot of that here today. Where the spirit that has been implanted in us, we have taken to be us, and we've identified with it. That is why in defending ourselves, we end up defending the people who rule over us. In defending our ego, we end up maintaining the social structure that has destroyed our ego to begin with. And you see it in our youngsters, who will fight and kill in the name of respect, and fight because their egotistic orientation has been insulted. And therefore, in defending their ego, they do not kill the people who destroyed their ego. They kill each other. And maintain the ones who destroyed them in the first place in power. And that's why the subtitle of my book, Black on Black Violence, was Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. We are killing each other in order to maintain this system. We have let ourselves become possessed by a spirit such that when we become aggressive, we aggress against the self instead of those who are the source of our aggressive orientation.